Hello everybody, welcome to Vienna. I don't have any video to show you and I'm going on my holidays soon, so I thought I would tell you about this. You seemed quite interested a while back when I did a video on metal that I'd found without a metal detector from the German First World War fleet that was scuttled at Scapa Flow. I got many comments on that and it was really nice what you said, and I thank you for it. So I thought I'd tell you about something on a similar line, and I want to start by telling you that I've got many interests as well as metal detecting, one of them being the death of John F. Kennedy, or the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and another one which I've studied for over 40 years is about Oliver Cromwell and the English Civil War. I come from Nottingham originally, the land of Robin Hood, and I was surprised to learn one time when I saw the film with Richard Harris about Cromwell, called Cornwall. I was surprised to learn that the English Civil War actually began in my home city of Nottingham. So I started to take a keen interest. And then one day, many years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I'd like to dive down a well. I never had any desire to dive down a well actually. But when he told me the location, and he asked me in particular because of my knowledge of the English Civil War, and he told me the location, and it was in a little village called Althorpe, just outside Nottingham, and it's still a little village today. And I knew that Althorpe belonged to the MP during the English Civil War, Colonel John Hutchinson. During this time when the Civil War started, there were fathers against sons and families against families taking different sides, as I'm sure there was in the American Civil War too. So I decided to go and dive it. We got a group together, we went and surveyed the well, and two of us went down on this day, first day. The water was very clear. We had to climb down a little ladder because the water was not right at the surface. We had to climb down a ladder just a few feet, maybe 6 or 8 feet, and drop into the water. And then, oddly enough, it was a square well, about 6 feet square. I'd never seen a square well before, but this one was square. And we got down and we sank down maybe 15 or 16 feet, maybe a little bit more, and it was very clear. But on the bottom was everything. There was angle iron, there was barbed wire, there was millions of rats and rabbit skulls, glass, you name it, it was there. So nothing to see much, but as soon as you touched the silt on the bottom, then that was it, all visibility was gone. And my arms sank up to my shoulder, and I thought, wow, we've got a long way to go here. Couldn't feel the bottom. So over the next following weeks, we got all the equipment we needed, and we made what you call an airlift. It's like an underwater vacuum cleaner. And we made this, it's a tube, and you put another tube running down the outside and up and back up the tube, and you send air down the small tube, and it causes an air pocket which then rises and causes a vacuum, and the water from below goes up to fill that vacuum, and it causes a suction motion like a vacuum cleaner. So we decided we'd use one of these. We got down maybe 4 feet, 5 feet, and we came across a very huge slab, 2 of them actually, and they're probably the stone slabs that covered the surface of the well. And there was maybe 6 feet long, maybe a little bit more, 2.5, 3 feet wide, and maybe 4 inches thick, very heavy. Too heavy to haul out the well manually. So what we did, we set up an A-frame with a block and tackle on it, put a rope around it, and we managed to get a rope around this thing, and we put the other end on the tow bar of the car and pulled them both out this way. And we was then able to carry on, emptying the well of its contents. We never found any coins. We did find some tunic buttons, which was a little bit interesting, and we carried on further, and in the end we removed about 7 feet of rubbish from this well. And on the last day it was my turn, because we was taking it in turns, and all of a sudden I came to a solid surface and I followed it around, and it was the base of the well, solid rock bottom, and in one corner was a lump of mud, and I put my hand in this mud. You couldn't do anything with a torch. You couldn't see anything with a light. It was impossible. The best description I can give you is to tell you that it's like swimming in oxtail soup. A light is of no use whatsoever in those conditions. Everything was done by feel in total black. In this lump of mud I found something round, and I thought it was a ladle, from like a soup ladle, with part of the handle missing, or just a part sticking from it, and a spoon, and I found another a bowl as well, which had a hole in it. I couldn't see it, I could just feel, and when I got to the surface I pulled out everything, and this soup ladle, which I thought was a soup ladle, was an absolutely beautiful 17th century bowl with a very ornate decorative handle. I wrote a story about it in a magazine I used to work for. The magazine was based in New York City, and I was often over 3, 4, 5 times a year in New York City. In fact, I had a meeting in Manhattan on the 12th of September 2001, the day after the towers came down. I've still got that ticket. I didn't get in till 11 days later, because they closed all the airports, and it was 11 days later when I went, but I did get a film of the towers still smoking, which I have to this day, and I saw it at first hand. But anyway, this was the article I wrote in the magazine called Immerse. I hope you can see that, and I hope you can see the spoon, and it was a beautiful decorative metal porringer. The correct name for this is a porringer, and it had some initials on it, and the initials were EM, and I took this to Nottingham Castle Museum, and I said, would this have been by any chance belong to Edward Montague? Sorry, I tell a lie, the Earl of Manchester, because it had EM, and the guy said to me, and the reason I said that was because during the Civil War, armies used to travel around, and they would billet at places that was sympathetic to their cause. So royalists would billet in royalist places, and parliamentarians would billet in parliamentarian places. And the Earl of Manchester had an army, and of course they used to go around the country fighting the battles, etc., and armies would meet up from the same sides. And the Earl of Manchester, I know, was in Nottingham on a few occasions. So I thought maybe that, and they used to have baggage trains. These guys, these important guys, used to have a baggage train with a wagon that would carry his personal possessions, clothes and stuff like his eating implements, etc., etc. So I thought maybe one day a maid had come out to wash his porringer, put it on the wall at the side of the well, and oops, knocked it over accidentally, never thinking of the advent of scuba diving equipment, and thought it was gone forever. Well, it was, as far as she was concerned, or he was concerned, whoever knocked it down there. And I found it, and I took it to the museum, and I said, would this have belonged to possibly the Earl of Manchester, do you think? He said, well, it would certainly belong to somebody of importance, because somebody who had money would have their initials on these porringers, but it wouldn't be the Earl of Manchester, he said, because he would have had his private initials on there. And it was at that point I told him, yes, but the Earl of Manchester's name was Edward Montague, so the same initials. So I like to think that it belonged to the Earl of Manchester, who was called Edward Montague. It would be nice to think that it belonged to him. The other porringer was just a plain pewter bowl, and it had a very square hole cut right in the bottom, in the base of it, and I couldn't figure out why it had got a square hole. And they told me at the museum that very often they would take something that was not so important, remove a piece from it to repair something else. So maybe that's why it had the very square rectangular hole in it, and it was certainly done on purpose. You could see that. And the spoon was a rat tail spoon, 17th century, and it was right at the base of the well. So we finished the thing, and you've seen the video with the porringer on it. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the English Civil War, how and why it started. So it started actually in my own city of Nottingham on the 22nd of August 1642 by proclamation, where King Charles raised his standard, and his standard was a huge thing, maybe 30-40 feet high, with his royal crest on it, and that was the rallying point for all his supporters. But it actually blew down in a gale a few days later, and it was considered like a bad omen. That was the start of the English Civil War. Although there was no actual battles there, that was the commencement of the Civil War, where the King declared war on his own subjects. Oliver Cromwell is my hero because he thinks more, or he thought more in an American fashion, really. Freedom for the people, liberty. The King was the type of guy who thought it was God's decree that he should rule and nobody should interfere. He was the boss. You're not telling me what to do, I will tell you what to do. He closed his parliament down on a number of occasions because he thought he had the divine right to rule the country without anybody interfering. But Parliament got tired of this, and they wanted, they had issues with him. And then there was a problem with the Scottish, and a war ensued, and the Scottish came down into England and occupied the northeast, Newcastle and Northumberland that way. And the King had to raise an army. And in order to raise an army, you need money. So he recalled Parliament to raise that money. And they said, fine, we'll give you the money, but we've got some issues with you that we want resolving. And then when they put these conditions to him, he tried to arrest some members of the House. And but they fled. They got the word before he came. He came down with his soldiers. He occupied the Speaker's chair. And he said he dissolved the Parliament again. So he dissolved the Parliament again. And basically this was the source and start of the Civil War, plus religious things. A little bit intricate, but Oliver Cromwell was my hero because he believed in liberty, although he had to use a dictatorship to enforce it. It's crazy, really. But look, let's go over to Nottingham and have a look at the place where the Civil War started, and then we can go over to Althorpe and have a look at the well, and we can also have a look at the little chapel at the side of the well where Colonel Hutchinson is today buried. He was one of the regicides that signed the death warrant for King Charles, and Charles was executed on January the 30th, 1649. And then we had a republic at this time, and Cromwell died on the 3rd of September 1658. His son then carried on, but he wasn't so strong-willed as his father. He was weak, and it was Sir Thomas Fairfax, who was a parliamentary leader, who invited Charles II back, and in 1660 he came back, rounded up these regicides, of which one was Colonel Hutchinson from Althorpe. And he imprisoned him, and he died in prison, but many suffered a worse fate. They were hung, drawn and quartered and dragged through the streets of London. Even the dead bodies of Oliver Cromwell, Henry Iton, who was also said to be the man who put the bullets in the gun for Cromwell to fire, was from Nottingham, and he also married one of Cromwell's daughters, Bridget. And the judge who found the King guilty, Bradshaw his name was, they was all dead. Iton, Bradshaw, Cromwell, all dead, all dug up, all dragged through the streets, hung, drawn and quartered, and Oliver Cromwell's head was stuck on a spike where it remained for 22 or 23 years, his mummified head, and it blew off in a storm. Somebody took it, and it's been handed down and sold on, and until in the 1960s, late 60s I think it was sold, and the University of Cambridge, I believe it was, acquired this skull, did some tests and said virtually 100% that this skull was Cromwell's, and then they secretly buried it. And it's secretly buried because to this day there are royalists who would like to get their hands on it and smash it. Retribution even to this day. So it's in a secret location. and where it remains. And but that's a little bit about the Civil War. Let's go over to Nottingham and have a look where they started, or where the Civil War started, where Charles I raised his standard, and then we can go to our thought and look at the well, what we dive down, and we can have a look at the chapel, which is right next door to it, and see where he's buried. So we'll catch you.